You know, it doesn't matter how good a cure you're using, what the best blend is, what type of scent you're using. It's not going to impact the quality of the egg unless you start with a good egg. And to start with a good egg, you have to be prepared and you have to take care of that fish the moment you catch it. As soon as you catch a fish, give it a quick blow to the head and then cut a gill ray. This will allow the fish to bleed out, making sure that the blood gets out of the meat and also out of the gut cavity, which will remove the blood away from the outside of the skein. If you take a look at a skein of eggs that comes from a fish that has been bled, it should be beautiful and orange. From a fish that has not been bled, the skein will turn out purple and red because that blood is coagulated around the outside of the skein. Once you get that fish bled out, on warm days, make sure you get it cooling on ice. This is going to help preserve the meat and the eggs. If you can, bleed the skeins themselves. A lot of commercial bought eggs that you get, the skeins are not bled. But if you can take a pair of scissors or a knife and cut that vein that runs lengthways along both sides of the skein and then force the blood out with your thumbs, what you're going to do is you're going to come out with a blood-free skein, which is even going to be better quality when you go to cure it up. As far as the skeins themselves and curing them up, there are a lot of different options. If you get a salmon or steelhead early in the season when the skeins are pretty small, you might want to cure those things up whole. If you get some skeins that are larger, you might want to cut them up into bait-sized pieces. Then again, you might want to cut them up into thirds, half-size, or even quarter-size pieces and cure those. Really what should dictate the size of the skeins you're going to be cutting up and curing is the fishing that you're going to be doing. For instance, if you're going after low water winter steelhead, you want a very small bait. You want something that's going to hang onto the hook in rough water, something that's not going to be overly big. If you're going after full Chinook, you want a bigger bait, something that's wet. And you know, a lot of times when you're putting your eggs up, you might not know what fishing you're going to be doing at the time of your curing. So just prepare ahead and make sure that you don't cut the baits too small. It's easier to cure them up and then cut them once you're out on the river. Now another thing, if you do have to freeze your eggs, make sure that you freeze them after they are cured. You don't ever want to take frozen eggs and then cure them, because remember, the cells, the individual eggs themselves, are mostly water. So when you freeze them, it's going to be just like an ice cube. They're going to expand, and of course when water expands, it fractures. And when it fractures, it's going to break the outer membrane of these eggs. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you a weak egg. Now you might not notice it until you start fishing that egg, and it's going to fall apart, it's going to lose its color, you're going to have a lot of skein, a lot of loose skin hanging there. That was probably a bad egg to begin with, had nothing to do with the cure. Now another thing you can do is when you're storing these things, make sure that you're going to increase the longevity of them if you catch a whole bunch of them and then freeze them. So for instance, you're out fall salmon fishing, you get a bunch of silvers or a bunch of Chinook, and you come home with a whole bunch of eggs. First of all, make sure that you have all the curing ingredients on hand so that you don't have to waste time going to the store. The less likely you are to have the ingredients on hand, the less likely you are to try something new. Now when you get all these baits cured up, then you want to label them properly. If you're going to add scents, make sure you label those properly and experiment around. You might use one of your favorite cures with 3 different scents. Make sure you label those. You might want to try 5 different cures on the same eggs to see which one fishes better. Now when you go to preserve these, you can do it a lot of different ways. If you're going to use them quickly, a lot of the cures are going to just keep in the refrigerator. Sometimes you can just freeze them in a Ziploc bag if you know you're going to be using them in the next couple months. You might want to put them inside a glass or plastic jar and light a match. Then screw the lid down on the jar with the match still burning. That's going to burn up the oxygen inside of the jar, and that's going to give you a few more months of life of those eggs while they're in the freezer. Another option is to vacuum seal the eggs. Now when you're vacuum sealing eggs, it's a good idea to par freeze them. That is, put them in the freezer for 15, 20, 30 minutes just to start setting them up so that when you start vacuum sealing them, the liquid does not come through to the seal, whereby breaking the seal. That is the best way to get the longest life out of your stored eggs. I've had eggs that I've vacuum sealed up to 2 years, pull them out and they're just beautiful, fresh, and easy to fish with. Again, there's a lot of different options when it comes to curing eggs. Make sure you have everything. Baggies, cures, scents, dyes, racks to dry the eggs on, tubs to work with, baskets, anything that you might need to make your job efficient. Again, salmon and steelhead have incredible noses. Salmon have a sense of smell that's measured in parts per billion. So when you're talking about cueing in on their olfactory senses, or even their sight and sound sometimes, you know, it's something that anglers can try to do to capitalize on, to try to get the most diversification out there to find what those fish like. One day, you might find the cure is working perfectly. The next day, the fish might not even look at that. This is where it's important to diversify your egg curing approach, utilize different recipes, but most importantly, when you're out there on the water, put them to use.